Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. We thank you for joining us today for Untangle's 101 webinar on our HTTPS Inspector module and the application we have that goes along with that. We're pleased to be joined today by Dirk Morris, our Chief Technology Officer, and the main push behind our development for Untangle. And he has taken time out of his busy schedule to go over some examples of the HTTPS Inspector, and we're going to also do some question and answer throughout the day. My name is Sean Gardner. I'm the sales manager here at Untangle and handling most of the inbound sales as well as with our partner sales as well. So apologize that the date is wrong. It should be November 21st instead of the 20th. But a couple of housekeeping things. We have our GoToMeeting or GoToWebinar interface where you can interact with Untangle. We definitely encourage you to ask questions through the question and answer panel, and we'll try to get those answered throughout the webinar. Keep in mind this is not necessarily a support call, so please try to keep those type of questions to a minimum. If you need additional support, we can certainly work with you and through our support team. We do want to get some questions answered, so try to keep them as non-supporty as possible, but also so that they're relevant to the content that we're talking about today. If you're having a problem hearing us, let us know as well through the question and answer panel, and we'll either slow down, speed up, or talk louder. And hopefully we can have a good webinar today. On today's agenda, we'll be talking, giving a brief overview of what Untangle is and what we do for you. We'll talk a little bit about a product comparison. We'll also review kind of the basics of HTTPS Inspector, and then we'll go into the demonstration by Dirk and with a couple of examples, and then we'll talk about some of the resources we've used today for you to be able to review. As a point of interest, we are recording this webinar today, and we'll be posting it on our website. So for those in attendance, you'll be able to review it at your leisure, and those that are not able to attend, you'll be able to review it later, and so hopefully that will be helpful. Let me jump to the next slide. So essentially, Untangle is a router firewall or a transparent bridge on a network. And typically, you would put us in these two different scenarios. A lot of people, as you can see on the left, already have a router firewall in place. And so Untangle is a next-generation firewall that essentially allows you the ability to insert it behind an existing router firewall in a transparent bridge mode. Then we can do all of the different scanning, filtering, protecting your network that Untangle does. And that way, when your existing router firewall is end of life or if you're looking to replace that, then as you can see on the right-hand side, you can actually move it up your network stack so that we can be your edge device if you want. Certainly, we're here in line protecting the network, whether we're the router firewall or whether we're inserted as a transparent bridge for you to manage your users. There's lots and lots of features of Untangle. The one we're going to be focusing on today is our HTTPS Inspector. And you can see from this slide here, we got some pricing listed for the number of devices that are being protected on a network. And you can see that Untangle's HTTPS Inspector does just that. It will fully decrypt and scan the traffic once it's been decrypted, and then it'll re-encrypt it as it's going out. And Dirk can talk a little bit more to that. Our latest version of Untangle is version 10, and our HTTPS Inspector is only available on that current version because the older versions did not include that module. A couple of things to note as well is that when you get our web filter, which is a pay-for application, the HTTPS Inspector is included with that, in addition to our standard package and our premium package that we offer. As far as those different pieces are concerned, when you get an Untangle or if you download us to try us out, you can see that our light package is kind of our platform. It includes some base free products that are free to use forever, but certainly there's a lot of people that need additional features, and having support as well as you can see, our HTTPS Inspector is included in both the standard and the premium package. And you can see the list of the different applications that we can do and the packages that they're included in for the pay-for services that Untangle offers on the software as a service that we have. With that, kind of screamed right through that, Dirk, so let me make you the presenter. And you can jump in both feet first.
Thank you, Sean. Can you see my screen now?
Certainly can.
Perfect. So thanks, everybody, for joining. I'm going to go through all sorts of the details about how to deal with HTTPS on your networks. I'm assuming most of you are somewhat familiar with Untangle and how Untangle works. So I'm going to focus mainly on how to deal with HTTPS. This has been a real hot issue the last, say, 2 years. Over 2 years ago, most all web traffic was unencrypted. So WebFilter alone did a great job. What WebFilter does is it sits at the gateway. As web traffic goes through Untangle, it scans it and says, hey, you're going to some site I don't want you to go to, so I'm going to block that. What happened is all these sites started turning on HTTPS, like Google, and so now that traffic is encrypted. So when it goes through Untangle, WebFilter looks at it and says, wow, I don't really know what to do with this because I can't read it because it's encrypted. So the choices it has to make are much more difficult. So I'm going to walk you through some of the options on how to deal with HTTPS. There's about 3 different ways you can deal with it. I'll walk you through the advantages and the disadvantages of those. If you want to read up on this later, just go to wiki.untangle.com. Go down here to search and type in HTTPS. And you can read about the options that I'm going to walk you through today. So I'll start off with the simplest, which is WebFilter without HTTPS inspector. This is just plain old WebFilter. What I've done here is I've gone to a Untangle install. I've set up a special rack that only this machine goes through. So I've got special webinar demo rack. You can read about Policy Manager and how to do this if you want. But basically, the only traffic going through these applications are the machine that I'm showing you right now. So if I go to some site I'm not supposed to go to, playboy.com, I get the WebFilter block page. If I switch back, you'll see it just went up to block pages 2. If I go again, be blocked again, you switch back, you see block pages 3. So this machine's traffic is going through this WebFilter. So the Playboy example I just gave you was unencrypted, so that one's pretty easy. And again, real quick, let me show you. HTTPS inspector is currently off. So this is just with WebFilter. WebFilter actually has some basic options to deal with HTTPS. These 2 options right here can help you deal with HTTPS. Basically, there's an option in HTTPS that says, I'm going to send the host name that I'm visiting in the clear text, but only the host name. So if I go to HTTPS Google, it'll encrypt all of that stream except google.com will be in the stream, so that the WebFilter can usually say, well, obviously I know it's going to Google, and I can use that information to categorize this and deal with it as necessary. So that'll help you block sites if you just want to block based on host name. So that's a pretty good option and actually will work for most people. The really nice thing about it is it's super easy. You just turn it on. You don't have to worry about anything else. But there are some downsides to it. So if you go in here, you can read basically the advantage of this technique. Really easy to deploy. Just turn on that option, and that's basically all you have to do. It's really effective at blocking categories. There are some disadvantages, though. One is that the block pages won't be shown. Because it's encrypted, we cannot actually return a block page. We just reset the connection. So if a page is blocked, you won't necessarily know why. The user won't necessarily know why. You also can't do fancy things like some of our options in here, which a lot of people use, are enforce YouTube for schools, which is a nice feature with YouTube to allow students to watch certain videos but not other ones, or enforce safe search on popular search engines. Basically, this says when you go to Google or Yahoo or Bing or any of those and you search for something, make sure safe search is forced to be on, so that if they search for boobs, they're not going to get a whole bunch of bad pictures. Those 2 options require modifying the HTTP stream. You can't do that when it's encrypted. So if you're just running this option, these 2 options don't actually work. Other things that don't work is if I block a specific URL. Say I block only one page on Wikipedia. Well, unfortunately with SNI, server name identification or indication, my choice is either block that host or not. So I can't block just a part of a domain. I'm getting there. So there are some downsides. Let me go in here and show you the event log real quick. So I just went to Google. So So I go into the HTTPS event log, or sorry, the web filter event log, and I go into all HTTPS events, and I click refresh. You can see, oh, look, here's all those Google things that I just did. You can see all the hits. If I go to Wells Fargo, that will load up, and then if I go back here, I can see all these Wells Fargo hits. And they were all approved, and they were all passed. That's why the website loaded. Unfortunately, SNI is actually not included in a lot of old operating systems. So most everything nowadays includes SNI in the stream, so this will work for most cases, but there are some cases it doesn't. And that is if you're using IE on Windows XP. I'm on Windows XP for this demo, actually, but I'm using Firefox right now. If I switch to Internet Explorer and go somewhere, and then I go back here and hit refresh, it actually won't show up anything. Nothing changed there. It didn't even see that stuff. If I go in here and say, okay, well, let's assume you don't have SNI present. What do you do then? Well, let's turn on categorize it by IP address, which is a crude way of saying, I don't have any idea what this traffic is, but I know what IP it's going. I'm going to talk to the web filter categorization service and ask them to categorize it based on IP, which is actually somewhat accurate in some cases. So I'm going to turn that on. Then I'm going to go back here and hit refresh. Loads again. Switch back to the event log. Now, you refresh, you'll see a bunch of basically visits to IP addresses. This is actually wellsfargo.com, but because I used IE on XP, it doesn't know the host name. So the summary of this technique is it's effective, I'd say, 90% of the time. It's really low maintenance, but it doesn't do everything. The things it doesn't do is it doesn't handle XP with Internet Explorer very well. It doesn't do fancy things like enforce safe search or YouTube for schools, and it doesn't show block pages.
Or any older browser, correct?
What's that?
Any older browser that doesn't have SNI either, correct?
Well, even old Firefoxes and old Chromes all have it. Basically, okay. It's IE on XP. If you have IE on a newer OS, Windows 7, Vista, really anything newer than XP, it's going to work. Okay. Any browser on newer OS is going to work. But a lot of schools I know still have a lot of XPs and stuff installed. And so maybe this is the final straw that it's time to migrate to a newer OS. Or maybe you want to do that later.
Yeah, we just had somebody that asked a question, does Chrome work with SNI on XP?
Yes, it does. I'm demoing Firefox, but Chrome works the same. It sends SNI with Windows XP. So if you're willing to live without the YouTube for schools and safe search enforcement and block pages and some of those nice things, it's a great option. It's very low maintenance, but it doesn't do everything. So what we wanted to add was a way to say, how do we handle HTTPS traffic just like web traffic? And that's where HTTPS Inspector comes in. So HTTPS Inspector is a separate app. What it does is it sees encrypted web traffic coming in, and it decrypts it. It presents a certificate to the end user, says, I am Yahoo. You're going to Yahoo. And the user says, okay, and we actually endpoint it and we decrypt it. And then we have the HTTP stream unencrypted, and we send that through all the different applications, virus blocker, web filter, everything, ad blocker, all the different applications scan it just like regular web traffic. And then on the other end, we actually create a new SSL connection to say yahoo.com. And then we have two separate SSL connections where we can see unencrypted traffic in the middle. So obviously the advantage is it's really powerful. It's fully featured. HTTPS traffic is treated just like regular web traffic. So you're saying, well, why on earth wouldn't I do that? Well, there are some downsides to this. The biggest one is it requires a new root certificate to be added to all the client browsers. So let me explain what I mean by this. Let me go over here. I'm going to turn on HTTPS Inspector, which, by the way, when I turn that on, these two options are basically ignored. I'm going to go ahead and turn them on, turn them off just for the demo.
While you're doing this, while you're pulling the thing that you need to pull, can I just ask a quick question about email when you're using HTTPS? Maybe if they're on a TLS connection, that's still decrypted as well, correct?
Like Gmail, yeah, sure.
No, like I'm talking about for spam.
HTTPS.
For spam
No,
email.
it does not inspect SMTP. HTTPS
Great.
inspects HTTPS.
Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah, it does not mess at all with SMTP traffic.
Great. Okay.
So if I go to Wells Fargo now, well, let me go somewhere new. Gmail. All of a sudden I get a warning. Well, that's weird because I just go to Gmail. I've never seen this before. Well, let me get the details here. This certificate is not trusted because there's no issuer chain that's trusted, basically. What that means is this certificate was signed by somebody I don't trust. Well, the reason that is because Untangle has its own certificate authority, and it's creating this cert. And I've never heard of this certificate authority, so I'm not going to trust it. It's not Microsoft. It's not GoDaddy. It's not VeriSign. It's not any of the ones I know. Basically, each OS has a list of certificates that it ships with that says, I trust all these providers. And it's not one of those. So to get past, I mean, I will have this warning literally on every single HTTPS website that I go to that HTTPS inspector scans. So what you have to do is install a root certificate, a new certificate authority, onto the clients behind Untangle. So an easy way to do that is just go to dog food or your URL of whatever /cert. That'll actually download the certificate authority. You can also do it through the administration UI. I'm going to say trust this CA to identify websites. Okay. So now it's different in every browser, but let me really briefly go in here and say view certificates. I think if I go down to Untangle, you'll see, okay, Untangle right there. So now I have a new certificate authority. So now hopefully if I go to gmail.com, not to show you my email, it logs right in, no warning, nothing. So now if I go to any HTTPS website,
let me take care of that. Hold on.
yeah. This guys, hopefully you can still hear me.
Yeah, let me just mute whoever that is. Hold on a second.
We have a classy webinar here for everyone.
Sorry about that.
Muted.
Things. This is the HTTPS Inspector UI. So the mode that I was talking about is HTTPS Inspector with full inspection, meaning all HTTPS traffic is inspected. Now I've installed that cert. Basically, I'm good to go. I didn't actually configure it to scan all traffic. To do that, you would say click inspect all traffic. I'll walk you through this later. So now that I've turned that on, it's inspecting every single HTTPS session, decrypting them all, and sending them through all the applications. So if I install Virus Blocker and Ad Blocker and Web Cache and whatever I want, Captive Portal, anything that crosses web traffic, now it's going to be fully treat HTTPS just like regular HTTP. So especially for Captive Portal, that's actually kind of important. If you're running a Captive Portal site, you want people to, when they're going to HTTPS sites, to get the block page and have to log in. So it's really fully featured. You just have to deal with pushing out that certificate to all the different machines. And by the way, if you're in a Microsoft environment, you can push it out with the group policy object. There's other ways to push it out. All you need to do is go in here to HTTPS Inspector and click Download Root Certificate, save that file, and then push it out with the group policy object to all the machines. Do a group policy force update. I'm not sure exactly how it works. I'm not really a Windows person. But you can do it with the group policy object, or you can just tell them to visit that website, /cert, and it'll install it in that browser. Without doing that, it will break certain applications and so on. But now that I have it installed, basically everything's treated exactly like I want it. If I go on the event log, I can see all the different, okay, it was inspecting this, it was ignoring that, it was inspecting this, based on the rules I have. So that's HTTPS Inspector with full inspection. Basically, it's the best feature-wise you can have. There are a couple other downsides. If you're on a really small box, it is, by the way, decrypting all HTTPS traffic and then re-encrypting it, so it will cause a little bit higher load. The other downside is there's certain applications that work over HTTPS that do not pay attention to the root store on the OS, meaning they expect a specific hard-coded certificate from the other end. And doing this man-in-the-middle thing with HTTPS is going to break those applications. A good example of that is GoToMeeting or Dropbox. So we actually have rules in here that basically say ignore Dropbox. Dropbox won't work because Dropbox expects a certain certificate all the time from the other end. So even though we create a valid certificate signed by Untangle, it's not going to trust it. There's no way to change Dropbox to trust it. So we just create a rule in here saying, well, if you're going to somewhere that says Dropbox in the cert, just ignore that traffic. So keep that in mind that certain applications Microsoft updates don't necessarily care about, and they also have hard-coded certs, so we ignore those as well. You may have to deal with some applications that do HTTPS behind the scenes that this breaks, and you may have to add a rule saying, I don't want you to inspect that stuff. So that brings me to the third way, which is running HTTPS inspector, but instead of inspecting all HTTPS, only inspecting the things that you actually care about. So similar to firewalls, there's two approaches to firewalls. The firewalls, you can say, well, I'm going to allow everything, but I'm going to block certain things. Or I'm going to block everything and allow certain things. The same is kind of true with HTTPS inspector. You can say, I'm going to scan everything except very specific things that I'm not, like Dropbox. Or the inverse is you can say, I'm not going to scan anything except very specific things. So let me go back to the rules, and I'm going to turn off rule number 4, which says inspect all traffic. This is basically the mode that HTTPS inspector ships in now. It's only going to scan important things unless you configure it to scan everything. These first two rules are really not going to have any effect. So every time a new HTTPS session comes in, we're going to evaluate these rules and figure out, am I going to inspect this traffic or not? It runs down, it says, is it YouTube traffic? Is it Google? Is it Facebook? Is it Wikipedia? Is it Twitter? Yahoo, Bing, Ask? If it's none of those, I'm not going to inspect it. Now, the reason we did these by default is because these are the HTTPS sites that most people care about. You know, things like blocking Playboy over HTTPS can be handled by S&I. These are the ones you actually usually want to inspect, especially YouTube and Google, because remember back when I talked about the options in web filter? If you inspect those, meaning you man in the middle of them, you can do things like enforce safe search and enforce YouTube for schools and things like that. So this mode is very similar to full inspection, but it has the advantage of it's only going to mess with those 7 or 8 sites that you say I want to inspect. The rest of them are going to be untouched. So it's not going to touch your Wells Fargo and banking applications. It's not going to touch Dropbox. It's not going to touch GoToMeeting. It's not going to do all that stuff. It's only going to do the sites you explicitly say, I want to handle these sites via HTTPS. You still have to push out the root certificate. Otherwise, Google, for example, will present a warning. But you'll have less of this case where you have to add ignore rules everywhere because it's not going to interfere with those applications unless they're talking to one of the 6 or 7 sites that you listed.
I had a quick question.
Sure.
In the case of using HTTPS inspector, will other untrusted certs still be visible as untrusted to the user? It doesn't green light all certs.
That's a great question. Thanks for asking that. So it will be invisible to the user, I believe, but you can say explicitly how you want to handle that. So there's a couple options in here I didn't cover. Block invalid traffic. Basically, sometimes non-HTTPS traffic tries to sneak out 4443. Actually, it's really common, so I'd be careful turning that option on. If you want to block that, though, you can by turning on that option. That's basically going to say, if I do something like SSH over 443 or SMTP over 443, it's going to block it. When you're creating the connection on the outside of Untangle, so let's say I've already accepted the connection on the inside of Untangle. I presented a certificate. Now I'm creating a new connection to the actual server, and the server presents the certificate. Basically, Untangle is going to trust it if it is signed by a certificate authority in its root CA, and it has a pretty modern root CA list. So it behaves exactly like your browser. If it's not valid, it's not going to accept it. If it's not signed by somebody it knows, it's not going to accept it. So what you'll have to do is go upload a trusted certificate. So if there's a site that's not valid out there, say you have a webmail server that you don't want to buy a certificate for, but you want Untangle to trust it, you need to go add a trusted certificate here into the list saying, okay, I know it's not valid, but trust it anyway. This is actually kind of nice because instead of having to do it on every single machine, you can do it in one place. Also, you can just say, you know what, trust all certificates. Just be aware that I'll be doing that. Basically, that means Untangle is going to trust all certificates, even ones that aren't signed by a valid CA, even ones that are, say, out of date or something like that, if you turn that option on. So the user doesn't get past this information anymore. Basically, the decision's made on Untangle, and what the user sees, if I go back to, let me say, Google.com will work. If I click here, this is verified by Untangle. So that's what the user sees now. If I look closer at it, it'll say, issued by Untangle.com, Untangle security. So the user doesn't necessarily see the information about the real certificate. That decision is made at Untangle, and there's a couple options to help you apply about whether or not Untangle should accept or not accept those certificates. That decision is basically removed from the end user. One of the things I should have shown you was, let me go back into full inspection mode, and this can actually be kind of fun. I'm going to turn on full inspection mode, so now it's inspecting everything again. I have the cert already installed because I already did that. I'm going to go to Wells Fargo, and I'm going to switch back to the web filter, and I'm going to say, show me all web traffic, which is so now you'll see with full HTTPS inspection, I actually can see inside the stream and all the different individual URLs being accessed, which is kind of fun. If you do it with Facebook, it's kind of scary how much information they send back and forth now that you can see it. But just like regular web traffic, I now have the full URI, I now have the full domain name. I can see the associated ones, like it's grabbing content from Akamai related to Wells Fargo. I can see all this information, whereas before I couldn't. I could just see, if I scrolled down, I could just see, okay, and when the SNI case, I could only see the host name, not the full URI.
There's a quick question, Dirk, from Jeff. He asked, do you have the ability to push the certificate link out via the captive portal interface?
We're actually working on that. It's not currently done. One of the things we were playing around with the idea of is inserting some JavaScript in the captive portal page to detect if they have the certificate installed or not. Now, obviously, they're going to get the warning. So before we can even show the block page, they get the warning,
Right.
assuming they're going to HTTPS. If they're going to HTTP, there's no warning. So what we've been trying to figure out is a way in JavaScript, which we believe is possible, to detect if the cert's installed or not. And if it's not, say, hey, we really recommend you install this. Click here to install it. And then most browsers actually just handle it correctly if you give them a link. Kind of like earlier, I just went to /cert. You can just create that. Oops. Oh, sorry, installed. Yep. We can just create a link there or load it up, and then it would be done. So we are looking into that for 10.1 in future. We're also looking at all sorts of other ways, brainstorming how can we make this cert deployment really, really easy and brainless. Right now, it's just totally up to you. There's several ways to do it. You can just tell clients to go to this link, /cert. You can send them an email with the cert attached, and they can double-click it. That'll work for most browsers, but not all browsers. There's all sorts of different ways. Group policy object, as I discussed. Some people have some really good ideas in the forums. We are certainly looking into how we can leverage Captive Portal to make it easier, though. A question came in about what about SSL tunnels, such as are used by OpenVPN. Well, that's technically a different protocol, so it's not going to mess with it unless it's HTTPS. It inspects HTTPS. If you go in here and you say block invalid traffic and you do OpenVPN or port 443, I believe it will be blocked entirely. If not, it'll simply, if you look in the event log, it'll come up as earlier, let me show you. It'll come up probably as ignored, maybe even bypassed, because it says, I don't understand what protocol this is. I'm not supposed to block it according to this setting, so it'll let it go right through. A question came in, root certificate. If we are a healthcare web application currently SSL signed by the hosting company, will it now be signed by Untangle? Will also this mean that Untangle can read patient information that's being transmitted? It's really up to you and how you want to configure it. You can easily say via a rule that you do not want HTTPS Inspector to inspect anything to my healthcare website. You can go in here. You can create rules based on all sorts of things. Destination IP. I mean, a common one is subject. So let me say if healthcare website, I don't know the name of it, obviously, is anywhere in the certificate, then I'm not going to scan that. I'm just going to ignore it. So that would be an easy way to say, you know what, don't mess with any of this. I have HIPAA compliance issues. We're not allowed to decrypt that traffic, so ignore it. Alternatively, if you don't get that and you say, I want to inspect everything, like here, it would be decrypted. Things would show up in the event log. You can't necessarily read the traffic because it's not like you can run TCP dump and see it. But all the web requests you will see in the event log. It will be scanned for viruses. It will be, it'll run ad blocker and web cache and cap and all that stuff. So how you handle that is basically a decision probably you need to make for your company, and whether or not that's a sensitive topic. I'm reading the questions here. We're trying to catch up on questions real quick. If there's any other questions on HTTPS Inspector, no, I don't want to save those.
I think a common question people are going to ask, Dirk, is just the effect on the throughput. I know it's hard to gauge that, but what can they kind of expect if they're doing full decryption?
That's a great question. As you say, it's really hard to pinpoint. The one that I just gave you a demo on is a little tiny atom with 1 gig of RAM and about 40 people behind it, running tons of VPNs. So on one side, I would say it's not going to kill your box. As they were saying, I was loading up Wells Fargo, no problem. Most of the load actually comes when it's entering the certificate the first time, which only happens the first time you visit the site. After that, it captures a certificate that's created by Untangle and presents that. So the first time you visit a HTTPS website, it'll be a little bit slower. After that, it's fine permanently. It stores those on disk. It'll never generate them again. But it still has to decrypt and re-encrypt the HTTPS traffic. So in most cases, I'd say you're not going to take a huge hit. If you've got 1,000 people and a lot of HTTPS going on, it's going to take a lot more CPU because just the decryption and re-encryption of all those HTTPS tunnels is going to take a lot of CPU. So it really depends on what kind of deployment you are. If you're really small, I think you'll be fine. But if you're getting big, a large school with thousands of students all hammering away at HTTPS during the day, that's when you're going to need a lot of CPUs and a lot of cores. So do keep that in mind when you're running HTTPS Inspector, that it is going to increase your CPU usage. It will slow down a site the first time you visit it. That's really not, you won't even probably notice that because you really only visit the site the first time once, and then you'll forget about that delay.
I guess the other thing to consider is the fact that with larger sites like that, it's really down to just their normal bandwidth that they're using anyway, regardless of the decryption that's happening.
Yeah. Somebody asked me to show these rules. These are just the default rules. So some of them say inspect it. If YouTube is anywhere in the SNI host name, inspect it. Some of them say things like if Google is anywhere in the certificate, the string Google, which actually also includes YouTube properties, by the way, inspect it. This rule, which is not enabled by default, basically says if all of these conditions are true, inspect it. Well, there are no conditions, so it's always going to be true. So basically, this is the inspect all rule. There's really not much to it. It just says if you turn it on, all these rules are never actually going to run. It's just going to inspect all traffic. This is just here to make it easy to switch between the two modes. You can delete these rules and enter in whatever you want. Wikipedia, if Wikimedia is anywhere in the certificate subject, which is who makes the Wikipedia certificate, then inspect it. Again, these are just an example rule set that it ships with. You can feel free to tune these, and as we learn about more things like Dropbox and so on that HTTPS Inspector interferes with, we'll probably add new default rules over time as well. Great. I really appreciate all the questions. I hopefully covered all the details. I know I didn't show you the reports or anything like that, but basically just keep in mind with HTTPS Inspector, HTTPS is treated just like HTTP. So it's going to show up in your web filter reports just like HTTP traffic. That's the great thing about it. We're really excited to have HTTPS Inspector available as an option. We've been thinking about it for a long time. That being said, we're going to continue working on this mode, which is improving web filters HTTPS handling without HTTPS Inspector, purely because we'd like that to be able to display block pages and possibly work with certificates and things like that. So we're going to continue to prove that as well, because a lot of people, a lot of organizations actually prefer this method because they don't want to deal with pushing up the cert. So we're also looking at improving that method, and all around the HTTPS handling in Untangle, we're looking at improving, and it's a big focus and push for us right now.
Great.
Sean, I'm
Fantastic.
actually going to hand back to you real quick.
Okay.
Or maybe you can do that. How do I do
I'll go ahead.
that?
I'll go ahead and take it. That's fine.
Awesome.
Thanks. I really appreciate your time. We know you have a lot of stuff on your plate, and I know that the information you're able to give is invaluable to a lot of these users. So.
And if I didn't answer any questions that you guys had, feel free to jump on the forums or contact support. I know we didn't have a lot of time, but hopefully I can answer any of those questions on the forums, or support team can help you out as well.
Definitely. Thanks very much, Dirk.
Sure. Thank you, Sean.
So we just sent out kind of an announcement, I believe it was yesterday or the day before, where we are now offering our appliances where you can get them with Lite on it. Again, Lite is the open source version of Untangle, or a base platform that we offer. So if you'd like to upgrade your existing hardware that you have, it's a great opportunity for you to take a look at that. It is certified and optimized for Untangle software, and certainly it's got the nice, pretty faceplate that we have done up for it. It's easy to transfer the licensing from your existing hardware, whatever that may be, to the Untangle appliance if you'd like. And anytime we ship out our hardware, it comes preloaded with our new version 10, which can save you some time of having to load it yourself on a new box. It's very quiet. It's a very solid solution. And then, of course, if you'd like, if you have older hardware, then you can use that, hold on to it, and use it as a cold spare, so that, you know, if our appliance goes down in the rare event that that happens, then you can transfer the licensing back over and not have any downtime, or have a minimal amount of downtime. So definitely encourage you guys to take a look on the site at our appliances. A lot of the stuff that Dirk covered was in our online manual on our wiki, as well as the HTTPS inspector. The package comparison, we kind of covered that off as well. And certainly we encourage anyone that hasn't already to download Untangle, and you can spin up a box pretty easily. The resources that are required for that is basically a box that will run Linux Debian, and the information is available on our download page. It kind of gives you a rundown of what you can expect resource-wise to need to make sure you include on that hardware. As far as questions and follow-up, Dirk mentioned our support team. Certainly we encourage you to take advantage of that and their breadth of knowledge. There's lots of different ways to contact us on our forums, on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and then, of course, sales@untangle.com, or certainly pick up the phone, give us a call, and we will definitely help you in any way possible. I think we've pretty much hit this pretty well, and I want to give a special shout-out and thank you to all the sales folks as well as support staff from Untangle that were here in support of Dirk and the webinar today. So without further ado, I think we'll go ahead and close things off. Just a quick reminder, this is going to be recorded, so you'll get a recording of it within 24 hours. Thanks. You have a great day and a good evening if you are in that time zone. Thanks. Bye-bye.